I wasn't supposed to end up here. Not in this town, not in this job, and definitely not behind a chipped oak counter pulling espresso shots for people who couldn't be bothered to look up from their phones. But here I was, barista, dishwasher, reluctant therapist, and semi-functional caffeine dealer at Beans and Brews, population barely enough to keep the lights on. My name's Tyler. Just Tyler. No middle name, no fancy credentials, just a 29-year-old with a college degree gathering dust in a drawer, and a heart that beats faster for ideas than it ever did for safe choices. I used to think I'd do something big. Found a company, start a movement, invent something that would make the world tilt a little differently. I had notebooks full of sketches and scribbles. Apps, products, slogans, even logos for things that never got further than my imagination. But dreaming's a lot easier when your rent is paid by someone else. After college, life didn't exactly pan out the way I imagined. A startup internship turned into a warehouse job. A relationship turned into voicemail silence. I ended up here a year ago. Broken, and just smart enough to pretend I wasn't. I walked into Beans and Brews because it had a help wanted sign and the kind of smell that reminds you someone cares. Coffee, vanilla, maybe a little cinnamon. The owner, Maria, was 63, 5 feet tall, and tougher than drywall nails. She hired me after asking exactly one question. You know how to show up on time? I nodded. Got the job. That was that. The place is small. 6 tables, a bar top with 4 stools, and a patio that only works when the sun isn't trying to kill us. But it's a lifeline to the locals. We've got regulars who treat this place like confession and customers who think I'm just part of the furniture. But the thing is, every single one of them carries a story. And I started listening. Not fake listening. Not smile and nod while wiping counters listening. Real listening. The kind where you start hearing the pain behind the jokes. The dreams wrapped in complaints. The loneliness hiding in just a small coffee. Thanks. There's Evelyn, who orders the same chai latte every Tuesday and tells me about her late husband like he's still sitting in the car. There's Marcus, who used to work on oil rigs but now writes poetry in a battered notebook with more water stains than pages. And there's Danielle. She orders double espresso, no sugar, no milk, no nonsense. Works remotely, some kind of freelance consultant with a laptop covered in feminist stickers and a mouth that gives no one room for BS. First time she came in, I tried to make small talk. She shut me down with a look sharp enough to cut thread. But she kept coming back. And over time, we started talking. Not much. Not deep, but enough. Little things. About the smell of burnt toast in the morning. About how she once punched a guy for stealing her lunch from the office fridge. About the fear that one day, everyone will realize she's just faking it. Same fear I had. One morning, between grinding beans and restocking oat milk, I had this stupid, wild thought. What if these conversations aren't just noise? What if they're clues? What if every little story I hear, every regret, hope, near miss, isn't just someone venting, but the seed of something bigger? That idea stuck. Wouldn't let go. I started taking notes after my shifts. Jotting down moments, quotes, fragments. Not names, just essence. Like, wants to start a business but doesn't know where to begin. Scared of failing in front of her kids. Says he hates people but always holds the door open for them. Too many ideas, not enough follow-through. Sounded a lot like me. That's when the idea hit me. Platform, no, a space. For people like them. Like me. A place to turn conversation into momentum. A kind of idea greenhouse, where people could plant a dream and get the light and warmth it needed to grow. It didn't have a name yet, or funding, or a clear business model. But it had something better. A pulse. And as ridiculous as it sounds, I think that's where it really started, between coffee cups and confessions. Not in a boardroom. Not in a pitch deck. Just in a cafe, where broken people kept showing up and pretending they weren't. Where I kept pretending I was okay, too. But maybe pretending wasn't such a bad place to start. I couldn't stop thinking about it. That dumb little spark of an idea. What if conversations could become something more? It followed me home, into my shower, into the few hours of sleep I scraped together after long shifts. It lived in the corners of my brain where doubt usually hung out. Only now, doubt had some company. I didn't tell anyone at first. Felt too raw, too fragile. Like if I said it out loud, the world would laugh it out of my chest. But then came that shift. It was a Thursday, slow as molasses and twice as boring. I was restocking the biscotti bin when Marcus came in, his notebook in one hand, 2 loose cigarettes in the other. "Hit me with a dark roast and a bad joke," he said. I gave him both. He settled into his usual seat near the window, opened the notebook and started scribbling like he was fighting the page. A few minutes later, he looked up and said, "Tyler, you ever get the feeling like you're almost onto something? Like there's a pattern under the chaos, but you just haven't cracked it yet?" I froze. Biscotti bag in one hand. "You mean like, life?" He chuckled. "Nah. I mean like something real. Something you can build." And just like that I cracked. I walked around the counter, grabbed a chair, and told him. Everything. The notebook. The quotes. The crazy idea that maybe there was a way to turn everyday conversations into something people could use. To create a community-powered engine of ideas, accountability, support. Not another startup. Not another app. A movement. He didn't laugh. He just nodded. Then he said, "You ever read about idea markets? Like Shark Tank?" He snorted. "No, like real ones. Places where people trade in possibility. You bring the dream and someone else brings the roadmap." I blinked. "That's a thing." "It could be," he said, tapping the side of his head. "And if it's not yet, maybe you're supposed to build it." That night I stayed at the café after close. Maria had gone home already, left me with the keys and a list of things to refill. Instead, I sat in the corner booth, laptop open, fingers frozen over the keyboard. I wrote the word convo at the top of the document. Short for conversation. Also sounded like convoy. A group moving forward together. A convoy of ideas. Yeah, that sounded like something. I spent hours mapping it out. Scribbles. Arrows. Blocks. A mind map made by someone half sane and half starving for meaning. It didn't make much sense, but it made enough. The next morning I showed Danielle. She was already sipping her espresso, hoodie pulled over her head like she hadn't slept. Her eyes scanned the screen, back and forth, then again. "This is either brilliant," she said, "or a breakdown in slow motion. Why not both?" I offered. She didn't laugh. Just leaned in. "You need a hook. Something more than just, hey, let's all talk about our feelings and build businesses. Nobody invests in feelings." "I'm not trying to get investors yet," I said. "I'm trying to figure out if it's real." Danielle sat back, studying me. "Then do what baristas do best. Make foam art." "No. Listen. Build it from the stories you've already got." And just like that, I knew the next step. I went back through my notes, every scrap, every quote, every heart-spill moment that had landed in front of me while I wore an apron and pretended I didn't hear everything. Patterns started to form. People weren't just complaining. They were trying to connect. Trying to create. Trying to feel capable. They didn't need a perfect solution. They needed a reason. So I built a framework. Not code. Not yet. Just structure. A simple process. 1. A space to share an idea, no judgment. 2. A chance for others to chime in, add, support, or ask questions. 3. A way to match people with different strengths, the dreamers, the doers, the organizers. 4. A commitment tracker. Like fitness goals, but for creativity. Accountability, community, and action. I showed it to Marcus. Then to Danielle. Then to a high school kid named Lex who came in for caramel lattes and stayed way too long because his home life was trash. They all said the same thing. This could work. Not, this is perfect. Not, this will make you rich. Just, this could work. And when people start saying that, you stop asking permission. You start building. I launched it quietly. Just a basic landing page. White background. My logo, a crude outline of a steaming coffee cup with 3 dots above it like a conversation bubble. I called it Convo Roast. A blend of caffeine and conversation. Cheesy? Yeah. But it felt right. Underneath the logo, one line. Big ideas start small. Tell us yours. I added a form with 3 prompts. 1. What's your idea? 2. What's stopping you? 3. What would help you take the first step? That was it. No logins. No ads. No sales funnel. I printed a QR code and taped it next to the tip jar at the cafe. Wrote a little note. Got a dream? Let's talk about it. The first week? Nothing. Not a single submission. Not even spam. I started to doubt everything. Maybe people didn't want a space like this. Maybe they wanted coffee, not connection. Maybe I was just another broke guy romanticizing failure. Then, one night near closing, Lex showed up. Hoodie half-zipped, earbuds in, hands jammed in his pockets. I filled it out, he mumbled, eyes locked on the floor. What? The thing. The idea thing. I pulled up the site and saw the submission. It was simple. Idea, a social app for kids with parents in jail. Somewhere they can talk without shame. What's stopping you? I don't know how to code. Or anything. What would help? Someone who listens. I just stared at the screen. Not because it was polished. Because it was real. That night, I added a new section to the site, Roasted Ideas. A public feed, anonymous by default, where people could read submissions, comment, offer help, or just say, me too. It changed everything. Evelyn submitted next. Something about turning her late husband's poetry into a community print zine. Marcus wanted to create a book club for ex-cons. Danielle finally submitted an idea, though she warned me not to quote her. Idea, a mentorship platform that matches burnt-out professionals with kids who actually want to learn. No fluff. Just real talk. I smiled reading it. The feed started to grow. Slowly. 1 entry. Then 3. Then 12. Some were messy. Some half-formed. Some flat-out delusional. But they were theirs. And something strange happened. People started replying. An unemployed marketing guy offered to help Evelyn format the poetry zine. A retired teacher chimed in on Marcus's book club. A developer from across the country emailed Lex and said, I'd build the app if you help with the design. It was happening. In real time. Right there, between sips of coffee and stacks of dirty mugs, a community was forming. Maria noticed, of course. One morning, she set down a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls and said, so what's this weird thing you're doing behind my counter? I braced myself. It's kind of a project. Like a digital town square, but for dreams. She raised an eyebrow. And it started here? I nodded. She shrugged. Then maybe we need better Wi-Fi. That was her blessing, I think. Danielle came in later that week with 2 notebooks full of notes. Not hers, mine. She'd gone through the idea feed, color-coded themes, circled overlaps, and highlighted users offering to collaborate. This is chaos, she said. But it's good chaos. You're saying I accidentally made something? I'm saying, she said, tapping her nail on the page, you might have made something important. The next step was obvious. Build a prototype. A real one. Not just a form and a feed, but a platform with profiles, skills tags, accountability reminders, a progress wall where users could post milestones like finishing a draft, launching a site, finally registering that LLC they'd been talking about for years. But I had no money. No team. No idea how to code beyond basic HTML. That's when Marcus gave me a contact. Her name's Kira, he said. Freelance dev, bit of a hermit. But she believes in weird ideas. I cold emailed her. Told her the story. Sent her a screenshot of the submission that started it all, Lex's. She replied 4 hours later. I'm in. But I work for coffee and honesty. Nothing else. Done. Kira lived 3 states over. We never met in person, just video calls where she wore the same flannel and spoke like every sentence was borrowed from a sci-fi script. But damn, she was brilliant. In 3 weeks, she built a rough alpha. Buggy, sure. But alive. We called it Convo Roast version 0.1. I told Danielle. She smiled. Not wide. Just enough to say, told you. But we both knew what came next. If we really wanted to build this thing, we were gonna need to roast the biggest idea of all. Ourselves. We launched the alpha version of Convo Roast on a Friday night, which in hindsight was a terrible idea. The site crashed by Saturday morning. Kira called me at 7:03 a.m., her voice hoarse like she just fought off a bear in her sleep. You let 800 people in without rate limiting. What did you think was gonna happen? I rubbed my eyes. I thought people didn't care enough to click. Well, guess what? She snapped. They do. She hung up before I could say thank you. I stared at the error page on my phone, half smiling through the panic. 800 users. From a stupid form taped next to a tip jar. By Sunday, we were live again. This time stable. And something wild started happening. People weren't just sharing ideas. They were following up. Like Lex, he teamed up with the developer from Philly, a UX designer from Chicago, and a marketing student from Vancouver. They scheduled weekly calls and called themselves Project Second Window. The app was still a prototype, but the mission was solid. No shame. Just space. Evelyn had her first zine printed on pastel paper, of course. I found her sitting in the café one morning, signing copies with a silver pen. She handed me one and said, that man I married, he wrote these for a future he didn't think would come. Guess he was wrong. Then there was Adam. 40-something. Dad. Recently laid off. He submitted this half-baked idea for a tool that matches freelancers with low-income businesses so the little guys don't get priced out of having a decent website. He called it small scale. 2 days later, a woman in Oklahoma offered to help design the landing page. A stay-at-home dad in Texas offered to write copy. A volunteer lawyer dropped in to help write up terms of service. I sat behind the cafe counter and just watched. Watched this thing grow. Watched people become more than strangers. Watched ideas become action. Danielle said it best one night as we locked up the cafe. This isn't a business, Tyler, she said. It's a bonfire. You lit it and now people are showing up with their own logs. I looked at her. Tired. Wired. Hopeful in a way I hadn't been in years. But how do I keep it from burning out? She shrugged. You don't. You just keep adding kindling until someone else takes over. I nodded. But that scared me. Because I wasn't ready to hand this off. Not yet. Convarost wasn't polished. It didn't have sleek investors or shiny logos or a trendy domain name. But it worked. It mattered. And more than anything, it had momentum. But momentum has gravity. And gravity pulls attention. That's when the email came. Subject line, partnership opportunity from Romegrid Ventures. I clicked it 5 times before reading it. They were a venture firm focused on disruptive community tools. Said they'd seen Convarost. Loved the mission. Wanted to explore scalable impact together. I forwarded it to Danielle. She wrote back 2 words. Careful. Sharks. But part of me wanted to believe. Not because I was hungry for money, but because I was starving for security. A shot at building this full-time. Quitting the cafe. Letting Maria retire. Giving Kira a paycheck bigger than coffee and honesty. So I replied. We scheduled a call. Their rep Logan showed up in a pressed shirt, a fake smile, and the kind of charisma you only get from selling people things they don't need. I love your vibe, Tyler, he said, like we were old drinking buddies. What you've got here is authentic. It resonates. I tried to smile. Thanks. We're just figuring it out. He nodded, all teeth and angles. Right? But imagine what you could do with real capital. A team. A marketing department. A vision partner. Vision partner, I repeated. He didn't flinch. Romegrid could offer seed funding in exchange for limited oversight. Just enough to guide the direction, you know? Keep it sharp. Focused. Profitable. There it was. That word. Profitable. He kept talking. KPIs, scaling strategies, ROI. Said I could stay on as chief culture officer. Said Kira could be moved into a tech advisory role. They wanted the bones? Not the blood. When the call ended, I sat in the break room of Beans and Brews, the Wi-Fi cutting out every 12 minutes like clockwork. I looked around. The scratched table. The flickering ceiling light. The sticky spot on the floor we could never quite clean. This was the lab. This was where it started. I texted Danielle. They want a buy-in. She wrote back. So what are you selling? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know yet. But deep down I was starting to. I didn't sleep much after the Romegrid call. Tossed around in my bed like a sock in the dryer, sweating under too many blankets and not enough answers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Logan's smile, the kind that said, we're gonna make so much money off this, kid. And for a second, I imagined what that future might look like. Office with windows. Coffee that didn't come from a drip pot. Paychecks that didn't bounce. But every time I followed that dream a few steps further, it turned cold. Because in every version of that future, the soul of Convarost, the messy, raw, imperfect soul, was gone. Sanitized. Monetized. Logged out. I brought it up to Kira on our next dev call. She didn't even blink. No. Just, no. I asked. Nope. I know that guy. I've worked for that guy. He wears shiny shoes and gut punches your ethics while smiling through his veneers. I leaned back in my chair. You think I'm being naive? I think, she said slowly, you're at the exact point where most builders sell their soul and call it scaling. Danielle agreed. Of course she did. This is the test, Tyler, she said, flipping through a binder full of scribbles from the latest user feedback. Right here. This is where you decide if you're building something you believe in or just flipping houses with prettier fonts. I didn't argue. But I didn't delete Logan's email either. I needed clarity. So I turned to the people who started this thing in the first place. The users. I put out a survey. One simple question. If Convarost became a business, what would you want it to protect the most? We got 216 responses in 48 hours. Answers like, the realness. Please don't let it become another toxic hustle cult. I finally feel seen here. Don't sell that to someone who doesn't get it. I don't even know what this place is yet, but it helps me sleep. That counts for something, right? One kid just wrote. Please don't screw this up. That one hit me in the chest. I sat with it for a long time. And then I wrote my own answer. Not to the survey. To Logan. Hey. Appreciate the interest, but we're not looking to bring on external partners at this time. The vision's still forming and we need space to let it grow. I hovered over send. Then I hit it. And felt like I just walked away from the edge of something shiny and dangerous. The next day, Lex messaged me. I heard about the offer, he said. Word travels fast. I'm glad you didn't take it, he replied. Because it means I can trust you. That trust? Felt heavier than money. Maria noticed something was off that week. She always did. You got that haunted look again, she said, sliding a tray of lemon bars onto the counter. Like you're carrying the whole world in your back pocket. I might be, I said. Well, she said, grabbing a rag to clean the espresso machine, just make sure it's a world worth carrying. She always said stuff like that. Wise in a way only people who've been broken and stitched back together could be. That afternoon, Danielle came in wearing an actual dress, which meant either a funeral or something equally serious. "You busy?" she asked. I held up the mop. "Just living the dream." "Put it down. We're going for a walk." We ended up in the park across from the café. Empty swings, half-dead trees, the scent of early spring clinging to the wind. She sat on a bench, lit a cigarette, and said, "You know, this thing isn't just about ideas anymore, right? I'm starting to. It's about people. About believing they can still matter. You gave them that. Now they're giving it back." I nodded. Then she added, "So what are you going to do about it?" I paused, looked out over the cracked basketball court and empty picnic tables. "I'm going to find a way to build this right," I said. "Without selling the soul of it. Even if it's slower. Even if it hurts." Danielle smiled, rare but full. "Then let's go raise some hell." We went full guerrilla. No investors. No safety net. No golden parachutes. Just grit, borrowed Wi-Fi, and a crew of volunteers who believed in this messy little dream more than they believed in sleep. Danielle started reaching out to nonprofits, ones that focused on entrepreneurship, mental health, reintegration, education. Anyone who might need a space like Convo Roast. She pitched it like a tool for idea equity. Kira kept hammering away at the back end, duct taping the platform together with open-source magic and caffeine. She didn't say much, but every time we hit a bug or needed a new feature, she just muttered, "Give me an hour," and made it happen. I kept the cafe job. Not because I had to anymore, but because I wanted to. Every shift was fuel. Every customer a new data point. Every story reminded me why this mattered. Like the woman who came in crying after getting laid off and ended up talking for 20 minutes about a cookie recipe she'd been perfecting for 10 years. I wrote it down, pitched it as a micro-bakery idea on the feed. Within a week, someone offered to help her design packaging. Another person volunteered to test bake her recipe in a commercial kitchen. She cried again. Happy this time. We were still small. Still scrappy. But the roots were digging deeper every day. Then came the email. Not from Logan this time, from someone bigger. BuzzFeed's Small Giants team. They'd seen the story through one of the nonprofits Danielle contacted. Wanted to feature Convo Roast in a write-up on tiny tools changing the way we connect. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But it was real. I told the team. Kira groaned. Danielle said, "Only if they don't make us look like some weird tech cult." We did the interview. I told them the truth about the cafe, about Lex, about the dollar tip that funded our domain name. About the way people walked into my life spilling dreams and never realized they were writing the blueprint for a movement. The article dropped 3 days later. We expected a bump. We didn't expect a flood. Users tripled overnight. Submissions came from everywhere: New York, Nairobi, small towns with names that sounded made up. Stories about dog shelters, mobile education vans, grief support apps, virtual co-working spaces for single moms. One guy submitted an idea to build a community for first-gen college students. Another wanted to start a podcast featuring people who failed publicly and survived. It was beautiful. And overwhelming. Our servers buckled. Kira didn't sleep for 48 hours. Danielle started snapping at me, her voice tight, her eyes red-rimmed. We were breaking. And then, like a fuse popping, I snapped. Not at anyone. Just inside. I closed the laptop, walked out of the cafe mid-shift, and sat in the alley behind the dumpsters. Stared at a brick wall like it had answers. I started thinking maybe this was all a mistake. That I wasn't built to lead anything. That maybe I was just a barista with delusions of grandeur, and all I'd done was create another digital dumpster fire with prettier words. That's when Maria sat down next to me. No warning. "You look like someone who's been holding their breath for too long," she said. I didn't reply. She handed me a cup of coffee, black, bitter, hot. "Let it out," she said. "Then get back in there. Whatever it is, it ain't bigger than what you've already survived." I took a sip, burned my tongue, and realized she was right. This wasn't about perfection. It never was. It was about showing up anyway. About building in the cracks. So I went back inside. Back to the team. Back to the inbox full of people believing in something again. And I told them. We slowed down. But we don't stop. We restructured the platform. Added limits to submissions. Introduced focus weeks where themes helped filter the chaos: Mental Health Monday, Tiny Team Tuesday, etc. Danielle curated the highlights. Kira optimized the database. And I started hosting weekly live streams, just me talking about what it meant to start from nothing, with coffee in hand and truth on the table. People showed up. One woman wrote in the chat, "I thought I was the only one who still wanted to build something." Someone else replied, "Nah, you just hadn't found your table yet." That line hit me like a freight train. Because that was Convo Roast. Not an app. Not a startup. A table. And suddenly it was everywhere. They say every good idea has an expiration date. That it either scales or dies. But I think they're wrong. Because some ideas aren't meant to scale like companies. They're meant to spread like warmth. Like stories. Like the slow, steady seep of sunlight through a cold window. And that's what Canva Roast became. A slow, stubborn miracle. 6 months after launch, we had 11,000 users. Most of them weren't founders or coders or brand builders. They were just people. Dreamers. The kind who don't get featured in glossy startup profiles or TED Talks. But they were showing up. Every day. One woman in Georgia used the platform to launch a grief group for mothers who'd lost kids to fentanyl. A carpenter in Nebraska created a YouTube series teaching ex-cons how to start trade businesses. A former teacher in Detroit began tutoring refugee kids over Zoom using lesson plans shared in the feed. And Lex? He and his team soft-launched their app Second Window on a beta store. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't polished. But it was real. He sent me a message the day it went live. I never thought people would care what I had to say. Thank you for building a place that let me speak anyway. I cried when I read it. Not loud. Just quiet tears. The kind you only let fall when something sacred breaks open inside you. We never became a unicorn. Hell, we barely turned a profit. But we started a community fund, just enough to help people pay for domain names, LLC fees, or their first website build. Kira added a request support feature to the platform. Danielle handled vetting, coaching, and the occasional reality check when someone got too idealistic too fast. And me? I finally quit the cafe. Maria cried when I told her. Then she made me a peanut butter cake and slipped a 50 into my hoodie pocket. For the dream, she said, tapping her chest. Not yours. Theirs. Danielle and I got closer. Slowly. In that careful way two people do when they've both been burned but still believe in fire. We didn't label it. We just showed up for each other. One day she asked, if you could start from scratch now, would you still build this? I thought about it for a long time. Then I said no. She raised an eyebrow. I wouldn't build it, I said. I'd live it. Because by then it wasn't just a project. It was a way of being. A belief that showing up with your mess, your half-formed ideas, your cracked hope is better than waiting until you're perfect. And it all started because I listened. Not as a job. As a choice. To hear people. To believe them. To see what could be built from their broken pieces. The day we hit 25,000 users, I hosted a live stream from the same corner booth where it all began. I held up my mug, cracked handle, chipped lip, stained like memory, and said, this all started with a conversation. The chat flooded. Hearts. Comments. Me too's. One message stood out. Thank you for proving that even baristas can change the world. I laughed. Hard. Because it was never about me changing the world. It was about reminding people they could change their own. All they needed was a table. A cup of something warm. And someone willing to say, tell me your idea. I'm listening.